Hello students, welcome back. So let us start with our next chapter, the 6 busts of Napoleon. So this is a little story of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. So Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are two immortal characters created by Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle. So this is the name of the author who has written this chapter, and Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are two immortal characters. So what do we mean by immortal characters, students? They are frictional characters. They are being created by Sir Arthur Doyle, who has written this chapter in the history of English literature. So let us start, students, with this chapter. It was not unusual for Mr. Lestrade of Scotland Yard to look in upon us on an occasional evening. On one such occasion, he confessed that he was quite confused by a case he was handling. So there is a character named as Mr. Lestrade who is very confused about a case that he is handling right now. It seems trivial but queer. What do we mean by queer, students? It means strange. It means something strange. Very queer. The first case of burglary. What do we mean by burglary, students? Robbery. Was 4 days ago in the shop of Morse Hudson in Kennington Road. He sells pictures and statues. The shop was left unattended by the assistant for a second. He heard a crash and hurried back to find a plaster bust of Napoleon lying in the fragments. So it means that the bust of Napoleon, so it was a half statue of Napoleon. So this is a chapter about some of the statues, some 6 statues that the detective and Dr. Watson, who is the writer, who is the frictional writer, they are both going to solve this case. So Sherlock Holmes is a detective and now they both are going to solve this mystery. So what is this whole mystery about the 6 bust of Napoleon and what is happening in the chapter? We will discuss later in this chapter. So the second case was most serious and occurred last night. So in the first case, what happened? That there was a burglary which happened in Morris Hudson Place, where the bust of Napoleon was shattered into pieces. And what was the second case? Dr. Barnicot, a medical practitioner who lives close to Hudson's shop, he is an admirer of Napoleon. So in the second case, what is happening? That Dr. Barnicot, who is a medical practitioner, he is an admirer of Napoleon, and his house is full of books and pictures and relics of the French emperor. Who is this French emperor here, students? Napoleon. So Napoleon was a very French emperor, and Dr. Barnicot, who is a person, a medical practitioner, he is very ardent devotee or a fan of Napoleon. So he has books and pictures and relics. What do we mean by relics here, students? Which means statues. He used to collect the statues of Napoleon. So these were exact duplicate of the one found broken in the shop. So in the first case, as we have seen, in the first case, repeat. So as in the first case, students, as we have seen that one statue of Napoleon was already broken, and in the second case another statue was found broken. These were exact duplicate of the one found broken in the shop. He placed one of them in his house as Kennington Road and the other on the metal piece of his surgery at Lower Brixton. Dr. Barnicot came down this morning to find his house burgled. What do we mean by burgled here, students? Which means some thieves came to his house and they destroyed the relics or the statues or the bust of Napoleon in this second case during the night. But nothing was missing except the head of Napoleon. So the thief came into the house and Dr. Barnicot noticed that there was only one thing which was broken. It was Napoleon's, or that one thing which was stolen. It was Napoleon's bust. It was found and smashed in the garden. So in the second case also, the bust of Napoleon or the statue of Napoleon was found broken in the garden. This is certainly very novel, Holmes remarked. So now Sherlock Holmes, the famous detective, he is saying this is very novel, this is very strange. So let us look into this case. This is not all. He reached his surgery at noon, and you can imagine his amazement when he found the windows has been opened and the broken pieces of. This is not all. He reached his surgery at noon, and you can imagine his amazement when he found the windows has been opened and broken pieces of Napoleon were strewed all over the room. So what do we mean by strewed here, students? Strewn, which means they were smashed, completely smashed all over. The bust of Napoleon was completely smashed. It seemed to me like the work of some madman who hated Napoleon. So now Lestrade is saying that it must have been a work of some angry man who actually hates Napoleon and broke all the statues. Without a doubt, this is all very interesting. I would be obliged if you would let me know of any French developer in the case. I was still getting dressed in my bedroom next morning when Holmes informed me that a telegram had come. It was from Lestrade and said, so in the morning Sherlock Holmes received a new telegram from Lestrade which said, come instantly 131 Pitts Street, Kennington, Lestrade. So Lestrade informed him that immediately come to this address. It is very important. I require your presence at this address. We reached the address to find a crowd outside the house. Lestrade received us with a very grave face. So what do we mean by grave here, students? With a very sad face. He led us inside and introduced us to the owner of the house, Miss Horace Harker, a journalist. So they have come to meet Horace Harker, who was a journalist. It is the Napoleon bust business again. So now the Lestrade is saying that this is the third case of Napoleon's bust which might have been broken. Lestrade informed us. But this time it is not just vandalized. So what do we mean by vandalized here, students? It means that it is not just the case of breaking of Napoleon's bust, it is murder. It is murder. So with the vandalism of the bust of Napoleon, there is also a murder which took place. Mr. Harker, will you tell these gentlemen exactly what has occurred? I picked up a bust of Napoleon from Harding Brothers about 4 months ago. I often write late in the night or early morning in my room upstairs. So now Horace is narrating about what has happened with him throughout the while. So now he is saying that I often write late in the night and early morning in my room upstairs, and this is how it was today. It must have been about 3 o'clock when I thought I heard some sounds upstairs. So now Horace Harker is telling that I usually write early morning and late at night, and around 3 o'clock I heard a noise. I heard some strange noise, and then suddenly I heard a most horrible scream. I was quite frozen with horror, and it must have been a minute or two before I seized the poker and went down. So what do we mean by poker here, students? So what do we mean a poker here, student? It is a kind of a stick. So Horace was very afraid by all the noise or all the horrible scream that he just heard. So he picked up a poker, a little stick, and went down. I entered this room and found the window open and noticed the bust was gone from the metal piece. I walked to the front doorstep and nearly fell over a dead body lying there. I ran back for a light. So now he went to the garden and saw a dead body lying there, and now he is very scared. I ran back for a light. So now he ran back in his house to get some light to see who this person was. It showed a man with his throat cut, lying in the pool of blood. I blew my whistle and then I think I must have fainted. What do we mean by fainted here, students? Behosh hona. So he was very horrified by seeing the dead body that he actually fainted. For I knew nothing more till I saw the policeman standing over me. So the next moment when he opened his eyes after getting up from all the consciousness, and he got up from after fainting, after gaining all the consciousness, he saw a policeman standing there. Who was the murderer man? Holmes asked Lestrade. We don't know. So now Mr. Holmes is asking that who was the murderer? Tell me. So now Lestrade is saying we don't know. He is tall, sunburned, strong man, not more than 30, poorly dressed. A clasp knife lay in the blood near him. We don't know yet if it was a murder weapon or not. So I saw a murder weapon, which was a knife, lying there near the dead body, and the dead body was a very tall man. He was sunburned. Everything they are describing that who was murdered at that point. There is no clue of his identity on his clothes. His pocket contained an apple, a map of London and a photograph. Okay. Okay, students, so these were the three things which was found in the pocket of the person who was killed. Here it is. The photograph showed a man with thick eyebrows and a protuberant jaw, which means a very long jaw, so they are characterizing how this person looked. What happened to the bust? So now Mr. Holmes is asking what happened to the bust of Napoleon. It has been found in front of the garden of an empty house in Camden House Road. It was broken into fragments. So this fourth case where the bust of Napoleon was also found crashed or into fragments. What do we mean by fragments? Into pieces, students. We accompanied the policeman to Camden House. Holmes picked up the broken pieces of Napoleon and started examining them carefully. The possession of this trifling bust was worth more in the eyes of this strange criminal than a human life. So now Holmes is saying that the bust mattered more to this murderer who has killed a man more than the life of that man, right? So he observed. Let's see now. Why did he choose this house to break the Napoleon? There is another empty house on the street which he must have passed before he came to this one. I gave up, said Lestrade. So now Lestrade is very confused about why the bust of Napoleon are getting broken into fragments, and it has become all confusing to Lestrade. Holmes pointed to the street lamp above our head. He could see what he was doing here and he could not over there. So Lestrade asked, why didn't he go to other house? Why did he only come to this house and kill this man here? So now Holmes is asking, this is because of the street light which was present here, and the murderer could see what he was actually doing. So that's why he didn't go to the other house to kill someone else, because there was no light present in the other house. Holmes pointed to the street. By Jove, that is true, exclaimed Lestrade. And now, sir, I think we should pursue our inquiry singly. We can compare notes afterwards. I should like to keep this photograph found in the dead man's pocket till this evening. Perhaps we could meet at Baker Street at 6. So now Lestrade is saying that we both should single-handedly solve this case, and I am going to put this dead man's photograph till evening, and we both are going to meet at Baker Street in the evening. So let us meet at Baker Street in the evening and discuss this whole matter. I might need your company and assistance for a small expedition tonight. Until then, goodbye and good luck. So what do we mean by assistance here, students? Help. So now Holmes is saying that I might need your help, but till then, goodbye. We drove down to Morris Hudson, the picture dealer's establishment. Mr. Hudson remembered having sold the Napoleon to Dr. Burnicott. He told us he had got them from Galder and Company in Church Street. Holmes showed him the photograph. So now Holmes has come to Morris Hudson, who has actually sold the bust of Napoleon to Dr. Burnicott. And Morris Hudson actually got them from Gelder and Company in Church Street. Why, it's Beppo, he cried. He was an Italian who made himself useful in the shop and did odd jobs. He left me last week and I had no idea where he went. So now Mr. Holmes showed him the picture of the dead man, and now Mr. Hudson is telling that it was Beppo. He was an Italian guy who used to work with him couple of weeks back, that he left the job a week back only. We left the shop to make our way to Gelders and Company. The manager, a big blonde German, answered all the Holmes questions readily. So now they have come to Gelders and Company, from where Morris Hudson bought the statues of Napoleon. His books showed that out of a batch of 6 heads of Napoleon, he had sent 3 to Morris Hudson and 3 to Harding brothers. So he sold 3 to Morris Hudson and 3 to Harding brothers. So out of 6, he sold 3 busts of Napoleon to Morris Hudson and 3 busts of Napoleon to Harding brothers. The bust was made from 2 profiles of plaster of Paris joined together. This work was usually done by Italians. So these were the works done by Italians, where they actually joined 2 plasters of, where they actually joined the 2 plasters. I know this rascal very well. It was more than a year ago now. So Mr. Galder is telling that I know this bastard. He used to work with us a year ago. He knifed another Italian in the chest and then came here with the police on his heels. Beppo, his name was. So now Mr. Gelder is saying that his name was Beppo and he actually knifed another. What do we mean by knife? That he actually killed another Italian in the chest and ran away. And then Mr. Gelder had to answer the questions of the police. He was a good worker too, one of the best workers. He got off with a year. He must be out by now. So now Mr. Gelder is saying that he must be out of the jail now. He already got away. So now Mr. Gelder is saying that he must have been out from the jail now. He must have served his sentence of a year. He must have served his sentence for a year, and now he must be out of the jail. We have a cousin of his here. He could tell you where he is. No, Holmes cried. So now Mr. Gelder is saying that we also have a cousin of his here working with us. So should I tell him? So now Holmes is saying, no, please don't tell us. Not a word to his cousin. We don't want his cousin to know anything about the matter. The matter is one of the great importance. Could you give me the date where Beppo was arrested? I see from your books that the Napoleon were sold on the 3rd of June last year. So now when was the Napoleon sold from Gelders and Company? On the 3rd of June. And now Mr. Holmes is asking, can I know when was Beppo arrested? The German looked through his letter and found that Beppo had received his last wages on 12th of May. So when did Beppo got his last wage? On the 20th of May. Holmes thanked him for his cooperation and help, and we made our way to the shop of Harding brothers. So now after talking to Gelder and Company, now Mr. Holmes is going to Harding Brothers. The owner of the establishment consulted his sales book and informed us he had sold one Napoleon to Mr. Harker, one to Josiah Brown of Lebanon Log, Chickwick, and third to Mr. Sanford of Lower Grove Road. Reading. He did not recognize Beppo's photograph but said he had several Italians among his work people. All of them could easily get a peep of his sales book if they want to. So now when they went to Harding, Harding informed him that he has sold Napoleon's bust to many people and showed him the photograph of Beppo. So he didn't even recognize, and then Mr. Holmes showed Beppo's photo to Mr. Harding's, but Mr. Harding told Mr. Holmes that he has never seen Beppo, but there are many Italians who worked with them and they can actually get a peep of his sales book. So this brings us to the end of the chapter, students. Thank you. I hope you all enjoyed the chapter.